Today we are going to start first chapter, that is the living world, and welcome to the podcast. So there are 4 points in this chapter that are mainly 1.1, that is what is living, 1.2 diversity in the living world, 1.3 taxonomic categories, and 1.4 taxonomical aids, and the chapter gets over. So let's start. How wonderful is the living world? The wide range of living types is amazing. The extraordinary habitats in which we find living organisms, be it cold mountains, deciduous forests, oceans, freshwater lakes, deserts, or hot springs, leave us speechless. The beauty of a galloping horse, of the migrating birds, the valley of flowers, or the attacking shark evokes awe and a deep sense of wonder. The ecological conflict and cooperation among members of a population and among populations of a community, or even the molecular traffic inside a cell, make us deeply reflect on what indeed is life. This question has two implicit questions within it. The first is a technical one and six answer to what living is as opposed to the non-living, and the second is a philosophical one and six answer to the what the purpose of life is. As scientists, we shall not attempting answer the second question. We will try to reflect on what is living. So let's see what is living. When we try to define living, we conventionally look for distinctive characteristics exhibited by living organisms. Growth, reproduction, ability to sense environment and mount a suitable response come to our mind immediately as unique features of living organisms. One can add a few more features like metabolism, ability to self-replicate, self-organize, interact, and emergence to this list. Let us try to understand each of these. All living organisms grow. Increase in mass and increase in number of individuals are twin characteristics of growth. A multicellular organism, this is important, a multicellular organism grows by cell division. Yes, multicellular organism grows by cell division. In plants, this growth by cell division occurs continuously throughout their lifespan. In animals, this growth is seen only up to a certain age. However, cell division occurs in certain tissues to replace lost cells. We know that cells, yes, cell division occurs in certain tissues to replace lost cells. Yes. Unicellular organisms also grow by cell division. Not only unicellular but multicellular. Both unicellular and multicellular organisms also grow by cell division. One can easily observe this in vitro cultures by simply counting the number of cells under the microscope. In majority of higher animals and plants, growth and reproduction are mutually exclusive events. This is so important and so much important. In majority of higher animals and plants, growth and reproduction are mutually exclusive events. What mutually exclusive events? In what? Higher animals and plants, growth and reproduction. One must remember that increase in body mass is considered as growth. In this thing, in this para, one must remember that increase in body mass is considered as growth. Non-living objects also grow if we take increase in body mass as a criterion for growth. Mountains, boulders, and sand mounds do grow. However, this kind of growth exhibited by non-living objects is by accumulation of material on the surface. In living organisms, growth is from inside. Growth, therefore, cannot be taken as a defining property of living organisms. Conditions under which it can be observed in all living organisms have to be explained, and then we understand that it is characteristic of living system. A dead organism does not grow. A dead organism does not grow. Reproduction likewise is a characteristic of living organism. In multicellular organisms, reproduction refers to the production of progeny possessing features more or less similar to those of parents. Invariably and implicitly, we refer to sexual reproduction. Organisms reproduce by asexual means also. Fungi multiply and spread easily due to the millions of asexual spores they produce. In lower organisms like yeast and hydra, we observe budding. Yeast and hydra, we observe budding. In planaria, we observe true regeneration. In planaria, we observe true regeneration. That is, a fragmented organism regenerates the lost part of its body and becomes a new organism. The fungi, the filamentous algae, the protonema of mosses all easily multiply by fragmentation. When it comes to unicellular organisms like bacteria, unicellular algae or amoeba, reproduction is synonymous with growth. That is increase in number of cells. So important, so important. Reproduction is synonymous with growth, that is increase in number of cells. We have already defined growth as equivalent to increase in cell number or mass. Hence we notice that in single cell organisms we are not very clear about the uses of these two terms, growth and reproduction. Further, there are many organisms which do not reproduce. Yes, there are many organisms which do not reproduce. Mules, sterile worker bees, infertile human couples. Hence, reproduction also cannot be an all-inclusive defining characteristic of living organism. Of course, no non-living object is capable of reproducing. Reproduction also cannot be an all-inclusive defining characteristic of living organism. Another characteristic of life is metabolism. All living organisms are made of chemicals. These chemicals, small and big, belonging to various classes, functions, etc., are constantly being made and changed into some other biomolecules. These conversions are chemical reactions or metabolic reactions. There are thousands of metabolic reactions occurring simultaneously inside all living organisms, be they unicellular or multicellular. All plants, animals, fungi and microbes exhibit metabolism. The sum total of all the chemical reactions occurring in our body is metabolism. Sum total of all reactions occurring in our body is metabolism. No non-living object exhibits metabolism. Metabolic reactions can be demonstrated outside the body in cell-free systems. Cell-free system. An isolated metabolic reaction outside the body of an organism performed in a test tube is neither living nor non-living. Yes, it's important. An isolated metabolic reactions outside the body of an organism performed in a test tube is neither living nor non-living. Hence, while metabolism is a defining feature of all living organisms without exception, isolated metabolic reactions in vitro are not living things but surely living reactions. What they are saying, while metabolism is a defining feature of all living organisms without exception, isolated metabolic reactions in vitro are not living things, but surely living reactions. Yes, they are not living things but they are living reactions. Hence, cellular organization of the body is the defining feature of life forms. Perhaps the most obvious and technically complicated feature of all living organisms is this ability to sense their surroundings or environment and respond to these environmental stimuli, which could be physical, chemical or biological. We sense our environment through our sense organs. Plants respond to external factors like light, water, temperature, other organisms, pollutants, etc. All the organisms from the prokaryotes to the most complex eukaryotes can sense and respond to environmental cues. Photoperiod affects reproduction in seasonal breeders, both plants and animals. All organisms handle chemicals entering their bodies. All organisms therefore are aware of their surroundings. Human being is the only organism who is aware of himself, that is, has self-consciousness. What they are saying, human being is the only organism who is aware of himself, that is, has self-consciousness. In this whole paragraph there are only two important lines, that is, photoperiod affects reproduction in seasonal breeders, both plants and animals. What? Photoperiod affects reproduction in seasonal breeders, both plants and animals. Human being is the only organism who is aware of himself, that is, has self-consciousness. Consciousness therefore becomes the defining property of living organisms. When it comes to human beings, it is all the more difficult to define the living state. We observe patients lying in coma in hospitals virtually supported by machines which replace heart and lungs. The patient is otherwise brain dead. The patient has no self-consciousness. Are such patients who never come back to normal life living or non-living? They can be said living if there is quantitative presence of brain. Quantitative presence means there should be a quantitative presence of we can say something in the brain. Quantitative presence. We need the quantitative presence, not qualitative but quantitative. If something is moving from here to there, then the person is living. In higher classes, you will come to know that all living phenomena are due to underlying interaction. Properties of tissues are not present in the constituent cells but arise as a result of interactions among the constituent cells. Similarly, properties of cellular organelles are not present in the molecular constituents of the organelle but arise as a result of the interactions among the molecular components comprising the organelle. These interactions result in emergent properties at a higher level of organization. This phenomenon is true in the hierarchy of organizational complexity at all levels. Therefore, we can say that living organisms are self-replicating, evolving, and self-regulating interactive systems capable of responding to external stimuli. Biology is the story of life on Earth. Biology is the story of evolution of living organisms on Earth. All living organisms, present, past, and future, are linked to one another by the sharing of the common genetic material but to varying degrees. Yes, this line is too important. All living organisms, present, past, and future, linked to one another by the sharing of the common but to varying degrees. Okay, fine. So the first 1.1 is completed. Now we will start over 1.2, that is diversity in the living world. If you look around, you will see a large variety of living organisms, be it potted plants, insects, birds, your pets, or other animals and plants. There are also several organisms that you cannot see with your naked eye, but they are all around you. If you were to increase the area that you make observations in, the range and variety of organisms that you see would increase. Obviously, if you were to visit a dense forest, you would probably see a much greater number and kinds of living organisms in it. Each different kind of plant, animal, or organism that you see represents a species. The number of species that are known and described range between 1.78 to 1.8 million. This refers to biodiversity, or the number and types of organisms present on Earth. So what is the range of the number of species? That is 1.7 to 1.8 million, that is 17 lakhs to 18 lakhs. Fine. We should remember here that as we explore new areas and even old ones, new organisms are continuously being identified. As stated earlier, there are millions of plants and animals in the world. We know the plants and animals in our own area by their local names. These local names would vary from place to place. Even within a country, probably you will recognize the confusion that would be created if did not find ways and means to talk to each other to refer to organisms we are talking about. Hence, there is a need to standardize the naming of living organisms such that a particular organism is known by the same name all over the world. This process is called nomenclature. So first one is nomenclature. Why we need nomenclature is explained here. To standardize naming of living organism so that whole world contains one name for one species. Obviously, nomenclature or naming is only possible when the organism is described correctly and we know to what organism the name is attached to. This is identification. In order to facilitate the study, a number of scientists have established procedures to assign a scientific name to each known organism. Scientific name. This is acceptable to all biologists all over the world. For plants, scientific names are based on agreed principles and criteria which are provided in International Code for Biological Nomenclature. For botanical names, there are which are provided in International Code for Botanical Nomenclature. You may ask, how are animals named? Animal taxonomists have evolved in International Code of Zoological Nomenclature. Here there is something good. It's informative. See, here it is given for. This is for. Here it is given for. And here it is of. That's zoological nomenclature. Here it is of and here it is for. Next, the scientific names ensure that each organism has only one name. Description of any organism should enable the people in any part of the world to arrive at the same name. They also ensure that such a name has not been used for any other known organism. Biologists follow universally accepted principles to provide scientific names to known organisms. Each name has two components, the generic name and specific epithet. This system of providing a name with two components is called binomial nomenclature. What is that? Binomial nomenclature. This naming system given by Carolus Linnaeus, it's important, Carolus Linnaeus, is being practiced by biologists all over the world. This naming system using a two-word format was found convenient. Let us take the example of mango to understand the way of providing scientific names better. The scientific name of mango is written as Mangifera indica. Let us see how it is a binomial name. In this name, Mangifera represents the genus while indica is a particular species or a specific epithet. Other universal rules of nomenclature are as follows. First, biological names are generally in Latin and written in italics. They are Latinized or derived from Latin irrespective of their origin. The first word in biological name represents the genus, while the second component denotes the specific epithet. Both the words in a biological name, when handwritten, are separately underlined, printed in italics to indicate their Latin origin. The first word denoting the genus starts with a capital letter while the specific epithet starts with a small letter. It can be illustrated with the example of Mangifera indica. Name of the author appears after the specific epithet, that is, at the end of the biological name, and is written in an abbreviated form. Example, Mangifera indica Lin. Lin. It indicates that this species was first described by Linnaeus. Since it is nearly impossible to study all living organisms, it is necessary to devise some means to make this possible. The process is called classification. Classification is the process by which anything is grouped into convenient categories based on some easily observable characters. For example, we easily recognize groups such as plants or animals or dogs, cats or insects. The moment we use any of these terms, we associate certain characters with the organism in that group. What image do you see when you think of a dog? Obviously, each one of us will see dogs and not cats. Now, if we think of Alcetanians, we know that we are talking about. Similarly, suppose we were to say mammals, you would of course think of animals with external ears and body hair. Likewise, in plants, if we try to talk of wheat, the picture in each of our minds will be of wheat plants, not of rice or any other plant. Hence, all these dogs, cats, mammals, wheat, rice, plants, animals, etc. are convenient categories we use to study organisms. The scientific term for these categories is taxa. Here you must recognize that taxa can indicate categories at different level. Plants also form a taxa. Wheat is also a taxa. Similarly, animals, mammals, dogs are also taxa. But you know that a dog is a mammal and mammals are animals. Therefore, animals, mammals and dogs represent taxa at different levels. Hence, based on characteristics, all living organisms can be classified into different taxa. This process of classification is called taxonomy. External and internal structure along with the structure of cell development process and ecological information of organisms are essential and form the basis of modern taxonomic studies. Hence, characterization, identification, classification and nomenclature are the processes that are basic to taxonomy. This is important. Characterization, identification, classification and nomenclature are the processes that are basic to taxonomy. Taxonomy is not something new. Human beings have always been interested in knowing more and more about the various kinds of organisms, particularly with reference to their own use. In early days, human beings needed to find sources for their basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter. Hence, the earliest classifications were based on the uses of various organisms. Human beings were since long not only interested in knowing more about different kinds of organisms and their diversities, but also the relationships among them. This branch of study was referred to as systematics. The word systematic is derived from the Latin word systema, which means systematic arrangement of organisms. Linnaeus used systema nature of the title of his publication. The scope of systematic was later enlarged to include identification, nomenclature, and classification. Systematics takes into account evolutionary relationships between organisms.